Hey, everybody, I'm Dr. Boyce Watkins from Your Black Education. And one of the things we like to do is allow you to meet extraordinary black people that are just doing amazing things. And I was told about this woman that I'm about to speak with. Her name is Dr. Angelique Johnson. Now, Dr. Johnson has a PhD in electrical engineering. And in case you don't know, that's really, really hard. She's also the CEO of MemSTEM LLC, and she's a faculty member at the Forks Center for Entrepreneurship at the University of Louisville, and she does work in biomedical engineering. So, Dr. Johnson, how are you doing today?
Awesome, wonderful. Glad to be
Good,
here talking to you.
good, good. Yeah, it's funny. You and I, we actually started the Facebook chat back and forth super
Mhm.
early, 4 or 5 in the morning, and it didn't surprise me because I read on your bio that you're a super motivated person. You've actually run 4 marathons. Is that right?
Yes, 4 marathons. I haven't run one in 2 years, and I'm hoping to run the Chicago one, not this
Oh.
year, but next year.
Well, you know what? When you run the Chicago Marathon, I live in Chicago, so
Oh,
I
awesome.
will be glad to show you your way to the starting line. And, and
You give me kind of Godspeed.
yeah, I ain't running. And as I told you before off camera, I probably would have a hard time driving a marathon. So much respect, much respect. In fact, actually, just to start there, I mean, how did you even get into this whole marathon? I mean, 26 miles? That's not something that just sort of happens. How did you get into that?
The funny thing is, it's not a complicated story. A year before I ran my first marathon, I said that I would never run a marathon. I had two friends that were planning on running a marathon. I said, that's crazy. I hated cross country when I was younger. I loved track and field. And then, lo and behold, a few months after that conversation, one of my friends comes up to me and she says, it's like I was 29 years old. She says, hey, would you like to run the Chicago Marathon? And I thought about it for a second and I thought, I'm going to be 30 and I guess it's all down. At that point, I thought it was all downhill after 30. And I said, okay, sure, I'll do it. But really, my mentality, even though I told her yes and I signed up, was I'm just going to take every weekend and do the program mileage. And if I make it, I make it. And if I don't, I don't. And really, it's actually, I think you could run a marathon because if you just go into it with that mentality, it takes the pressure off of you. And then before you know it, you're up to 26.2 miles.
Uh, well, you know what? It would be fun, and I remember when Oprah would run the marathons. I guess the poor Oprah, she's had the whole up and down thing with the weight,
Yeah.
but actually to some extent that's inspirational to me because it just sort of says, well, if she's able to sort of go from where she was weight wise and then run a marathon, I guess anybody can do it. I remember Diddy ran a marathon. It impresses me when I see all these people running marathons, and it just when I think about it, my feet start to hurt just thinking about just all that wear and tear on your joints.
It's the people that go out there and they're really trying to compete hard, that have the black toes that fall off, and not the toenails, not toenails.
They're losing toes now.
When I ran my first Chicago Marathon, it was actually the one year that the Chicago Marathon got canceled because it was too hot. And I was running that marathon and I said, I am not stopping. And I didn't. I ran the whole thing. And the police, they tried to stop us a little bit, but they understood our pain. They understood that we get trained. And so they were like, you can go ahead, I guess. Go ahead. Just keep running it. But I mean, as you're running, you just saw the most fit people were the ones getting carted away in ambulances. Like you couldn't go a quarter mile without seeing somebody rolling on the ground and ambulance coming up and picking them up. And I think that's just, because they're pushing themselves. We were just like, I just want to medal and I want to finish. So, and it's interesting about Oprah. She actually was kind of inspiring because every time I wanted to quit, I'd be like, Oprah did this. Dang, Oprah did this. Okay. Like, come on.
Wow, well, I love it. Well, I think it's interesting because you talk about Oprah being just a symbol of inspiration for so many people. I think a lot of us have that ability as well, on just maybe on our own level, right? We can't all be Oprah, but we can
Yeah.
all be somebody's Oprah,
Yeah.
and I think that you're an Oprah for a lot of people. Let's talk about you and your background. I mean, first and foremost, you don't see a lot of people, period, with the credentials that you have, but also you being a black woman, that means a lot. Even though the black women are conquering the world slowly but surely, just doing amazing things in STEM alone. Tell me, what led you to go into the field that you went into and to become a scientist, not just at a basic level, but at the absolute highest level?
So I come from a big family. I have five brothers and five sisters. And my parents, growing up, my dad was a chemical engineer. I saw him go back and get his master's for environmental engineering. So I had that engineering connect from my parents. My mom, she studied math at Fisk University. She worked at General Electric, I believe, if I'm getting it right, for a few years. And then once she started having kids, she became a stay-at-home mom. And so she actually ended up homeschooling us when I was in third grade. My siblings were in different grade levels. She pulled us out of the school system and she just felt like she could do a better job, in particular for her African American kids, than what was being given to them in the public school system. Or we went to private school in some cases too. She even felt like she could do better than the private school system. But I think growing up and having parents that were always focusing on, do the best you can do, in particular, do it in engineering or science because we had no money. So even though my parents were educated, we were dirt poor. And, they already knew they couldn't even afford half a textbook for college. So my mom had her hustle was get into engineering, get all this, good SAT scores, all these good, summer camp programs, and get a full scholarship to go to college. And if you want to pick up a second major, sure. If you want to pick up an English major, do that. But your primary major needs to be your money maker. And so that really is what kind of got me into the engineering field. But because they were doing that, I was doing summer camps when I was younger, and I was learning the fun side of engineering. And even as an African American woman, being the one of only in those summer camps, it was still a good way to see the beauty and the fun of it. So when I work with kids, I'm always trying to think, how can I make engineering fun for them? All right. And it has nothing to do with, math equations and all this other stuff, and so that really is what kind of, I saw the fun in it and I was like, okay, this is cool. I can rock with the fun side of it.
Mm. Well, it's so interesting that you talk about your home environment, and it almost sounds like your parents were brilliant enough to create a culture of learning, high achievement. I don't think that you running a marathon is entirely uncorrelated with the fact that you have a PhD in electrical engineering, right? There's a mindset that comes with that. Just set the goal, work consistently, overcome the obstacles, push through the pain, achieve the objective. That kind of approach. Tell me more about your family culture. Did this? How did this manifest itself in your siblings? What do they do?
So I have a lot of us definitely went on to get our higher degrees. I have to do the math now. There's me, my brother Lee, my brother Morgan, and my sister Maya. So there's four of us that have PhDs. And then I have one sister, she has her MD. And then most of my siblings went off to get, either engineering degrees or physics degrees or math degrees. I have one sister, she went off to Oberlin and she got a degree in classical piano. Hope I'm not mixing that up. So we were high achievers. But I think the one thing, if I can say, that my parents instilled in us that particularly helped as African Americans, trying to attain these degrees was you don't take no for an answer. And there were just so many of my friends that didn't make it. And I remember I'd just be sitting there thinking, like, okay, well, we're going to go down to the financial aid office and okay, well, we're going to go talk to your professor and we're going to, and I just like, if I had a problem, I called home to my mom and I was like, oh, it's not working out. Oh, got a bad grade, whatever. My mom would be like, so what did you do? Did you go to the professor? Did you go to his house? Like she went to that level, of just you never stop the hustle. Like you always have to be on your grind with not just technically what you do is not about, I guess we learned it's about smarts, but we learned it's about pushing through and not taking no and not letting somebody step over you and not getting pushed to the wayside and understanding how to play the game. Because really it is a game that you have to play to be successful in a lot of these fields as an African American. You have to know what is it that you got to do to make it through, because you are going to be kind of pushed aside a lot. You are going to have people that are not supporting you in the ways that they can. And you got to find the ones that support you. My parents always push that too. Find your advocate on campus, and whatever you're doing. Now that I work, let's find your advocate at work, who's going to give you the money for your company. You got to find that person. So
Well, you know what? I'll tell you, Dr. Johnson. I have a confession to make. I asked you about your family, kind of already knowing what the answer was going to be.
Oh,
You before we talk, and you can confirm this. I mean, before we talk, I didn't ask you much about your family because we
yeah.
talked about maybe 20 minutes before, but I knew that whatever you were going to tell me about your other siblings, and you did tell me you had five brothers and
Yeah.
five. Did you say five brothers and five sisters?
Yeah. So
That's a
there's
nice
enough
that's
of
a
us
nice
all together.
symmetric layout of children, and but I knew I just knew I said I bet you if I ask her about her family, I'm going to hear a lot of great things. Now, of course, not everybody in every family ends up at what we want them to be, but
Yeah.
I knew that there would be some sort of pattern. Where you weren't going to sort of just be the only person doing these amazing things.
Hmm.
What I tend to see is that culture is contagious.
Hmm.
That if you have a positive, uplifting, empowering culture, you're going to see all your children. Those apples are going to fall right next to the tree.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, you can see examples where toxic, debilitating culture can just affect one child after another and one generation after another.
Yeah.
And so that's really impressive to me, and I love hearing about it. I love talking about that because I can think of another person I know. Her name is Dr. Mary Stoddard. She's
Hmm.
actually in Louisville with you. In
Oh,
fact, her
okay.
husband teaches at the University of Louisville. He's a
Oh,
cardiologist there, Dr. Stoddard. Yeah, look him up. He's
oh,
a friend
okay.
of mine. And here's the thing, Mary, who is what is she got a law degree and a
Mm.
PhD. And
Wow.
she literally walked across the stage to pick up her law degree the day after she had her third child or something like that. It was something crazy. And she commuted. Right, she commuted 70 miles every couple of days to Lexington to go to school because she was living in Louisville, raising five kids while she's finishing law school. Just you know what I mean. Just that sort
Well,
of like I'm gonna get it no matter what kind of attitude. Now, but if you go back a generation, remember apples falling next to trees. Her parents were sharecroppers, and her parents had I think 11 children, and
mm,
every single one of those kids graduated from college. Why?
wow.
Because they just set a pattern. They set a culture in the household. No excuses. Education matters. You work hard for what you want, and each one teaches and supports the next one. Right? So
Hmm.
when the first child finished school, they were expected to send money back so the next one could get through school, and the next
Yeah.
one, and the next one, and so I love that. I love what you're saying. Now, one other thing that I thought about, and I want to ask you about this. Um, you were talking about the power of persistence. Did you see that new movie, The Martian, starring
So
Matt
I
Damon?
haven't seen that yet, but everybody tells me I gotta go see it.
You've got to see this movie. You have to see this movie. I saw it a couple of days ago. It was one of the best, most inspirational movies I've ever
Wow.
seen.
Okay, I'm
What
gonna go see this movie.
Yes, when it comes to, especially when it comes to science, and I could tell what they were doing. Honestly, I think it was almost a propaganda exercise because they like we're gonna make NASA look great. We're gonna inspire people to want to go to Mars. But basically, The Martian is about a character, Matt Damon, who's with his crew on Mars, and he gets stranded on Mars. So he gets lost in a dust storm, and they take
Yeah.
off because they think he's dead. So he's there on this desolate planet far away
Mm,
with this habitat that's only designed to last for 30 days. And
mm,
so he literally, he's sitting there and he's just trying to, he's thinking, I'm gonna die, right? And then
yeah.
he just says, you know what, I'm a botanist from the University of Chicago. And he literally uses this line. He says, "I'm gonna science the shit out of Mars." He said, Mars will come to," and I shouldn't have said that word. I apologize. I was quoting the movie, y'all. I promise. And but he's basically saying, I will use science to allow me to survive. So what happens is he's meeting one obstacle after another, and his attitude the whole time is, well, this rover is only designed to go 30 miles, but I've got to go 2,600 miles to reach the such and such a point. So I
Mm,
have to figure out how to survive in this rover for however many days it takes me to drive 2,600 miles, or I need to figure out how to grow food on Mars. So he takes the human waste, and he mixes it with the Martian soil and builds a greenhouse out with this plastic and starts growing these potatoes on Mars. So it's a really awesome movie for anybody that appreciates STEM, and just a good story. And it's a reminder of the importance of persistence in terms of achieving our goals. Now it's
oh.
funny. Here I am. I'm supposed to be asking you questions, but I just did all the talking, so I'm going to shut up.
Oh no, I'm entertained.
Yeah, you gotta see the movie. I guarantee you, it will be, if not your favorite movie of the year, one of your favorite.
Okay, I'm definitely gonna go see it.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Excellent. I highly recommend it. Now, what I wanted to ask you about is this. You're not just a scholar. To call you a scholar, I think would be an understatement because you're doing so many things. You're the CEO of MemStem. Tell me about MemStem and just what you're doing as an entrepreneur.
Cool, perfect. So MemStim, we basically make electronics that you implant in the body that stimulate the nerves of the body or stimulate neurons in the body. That's the general definition. They're called neurostimulator devices. What we specifically focus on is the electrode lead. So it's a sometimes this length device, sometimes a little bit shorter, and basically think pacemaker lead, right? Everybody's usually familiar with that. Well, there's lots of technologies like pacemakers that they put in different parts of the body. So people that have Parkinson's disease, you might take a lead, an electrode, right, a bundle of wires, and stick it in somebody's brain. And if you stimulate in the brain, right, a person could have tremors and their arms could be tremoring like this. As soon as you turn on the current, it stabilizes, it stops, they can write. Cochlear implants are another one. That's my primary focus for our first product that we're trying to roll out. Cochlear implants, they stimulate the auditory nerves, and people that could hear nothing before, suddenly they can understand conversation and speech. And so they're using it for a whole host of ideas. There's oncoming products, for retinal implants, people that are completely blind, suffer a particular kind of blindness. They can stimulate in the eye, and these people can now follow a white line and see some sort of characters. Again, it's not a lot of these devices aren't fully restoring you to what you would have if everything was functioning normally from the get-go, but they're offering a lot of much needed aid for people that clearly are suffering from debilitating diseases or disorders. So that's pretty much what we do. And to be a little bit more detailed, we make those electrode leads using fully automated manufacturing. So think about your integrated circuit, right? The circuit chips that are in your cell phones. Don't make fun of me because still got the iPhone 4, but
I will be making fun of you after this interview's over, but please continue.
but even with my iPhone 4, the reason that we can have cell phones like this, the reason that we have so much capability powered into this little handheld device is that circuits have been able to be made smaller and cheaper. Well, right now, medical devices, a lot of them are still made by hand. So I'm trying to do that same shrinking of size, increasing of power for medical devices that you have with integrated circuits. So we take these hand assembled electrode leads and we make them on a wafer. We make them fully automated. We can make 100 of these particular devices. So imagine 100 pacemaker leads at a time versus what is currently done now, which is one pacemaker lead per technician that's assembling these wires. And it's somewhat automated, but not really. It's a very expensive process. So we, currently cost maybe around 3,000 or something like that for a cochlear implant array. Manufacturing wise, we can make it for $50. So we're
Mm.
cutting down the cost of the price as well as being able to add in additional performance and features.
How are you manufacturing this? How's
Yep.
that happening?
So we manufacture it in a clean room facility. So again, just like integrated circuits, Intel commercials used to show the people in the bunny suits. They'd be all dressed up in a white suit. Well, that's me every day. Put on my white suit from head to toe. It's a clean room. They don't want any dust particles. We go in, and there's lots of tools where you take this wafer, which think about like a saucer, and your saucer, and you go just like you go to a buffet, and you want here's what I want from each item on the buffet. Well, this saucer for us becomes a platform. We can say, okay, well, I want metal traces. Okay, put on my metal traces using a different machine. I can go and put on my polymer from another machine. And it's like I'm building up these layers by just taking it from one robotic machine to the next. And, I can have many items on my plate. So I can have a lot of devices on this one wafer. So again, you're able to do a lot at a time versus just one at a time by hand.
Mm.
So we use the clean room microfabrication is what they call it. That's where the MEMS and MEMStim comes from, micro electromechanical systems and stimulators. It's just a combination of those two things.
That sounds expensive. What
Yeah.
was it?
It is very expensive to build one particular facility for microfabrication. However, just like with integrated circuits, many people can come in and use the same facility. So I pay a fee for service and I come and I use the facility. The graduate students use the facility. Toyota might come in and say, hey, they want to do their R&D in the facility. And so because we're all sharing the same multi-million dollar facility, our costs are very cheap. So it's actually a lot cheaper to produce it this way than to produce it by hand, even though the facility and the infrastructure costs are much higher. You share those costs among multiple users.
Mm. So are you how's that going as far as your business? I'm really intrigued by this. So have you
Yep.
actually gotten to the point where you're actually making revenue and all this other stuff?
So I'm in the medical device space, and I people always ask me that question, and we have to get through the FDA. We have a road to go before we're making revenue. But the end goal in a company like mine is not so much revenue, but a lot of times we want to exit to a bigger company. So I want to get the technology through a significant number of milestones, so that a company like Medtronic will come in and say, okay, well, we want to bring your technology in house, or we want to acquire you. And they'll acquire you sometimes before you're ever generating revenue. And it doesn't happen that way for everybody. It really depends on your space and your particular technology. But for me, what we're focusing on is making it to that stage where it can cross over and get approved by the FDA. So right now we have our technology, but we're trying to take it through a series of tests, both in a human. We use cadaver models, right? So we're not putting in live humans, but you need to show that the device isn't going to damage any biology. So we use cadaver models for that. And then also mechanical tests and electrical tests. You need to show that this device I'm making is not going to fall apart in the surgeon's hands. It's not going to fall apart in somebody's body. It's going to withstand the test of time. And that's what we're focusing on. Because if we can make it through these milestones with our technology, we can demonstrate to a potential buyer in the future that, hey, we've already de-risked it and taken out all the risks of this technology. And, hopefully you can incorporate this into your system. And we've actually talked to several customers in the space that are anxious to get their hands on the technology, but as with all things, what's our biggest hurdle? Proving to them that it's reliable and that it'll pass the FDA. And that's the biggest thing that competitors in our space haven't been able to do that we're focusing on. And we're actually making some good strides in that.
Wow. Well, it's good to know that the FDA is protecting us. I see so many documentaries that actually question that fact, right? So with you kind of being an entrepreneur in addition to being a scholar, that was interesting to me because as I was mentioning to you, I think a lot of black scholars, as amazing and as brilliant as we can be, we end up sometimes being pigeonholed. You study a niche on top of a niche on top of a niche, and then the only focal point for many scholars is getting the job at a university, getting tenure, and living happily ever after, whatever that means.
Yeah.
But I noticed that you have that sort of plan B in place, or not even really a plan B. It almost sounds like it's part of your plan A, that you're going to be
Yeah.
a scholar and an entrepreneur, and you're also a philanthropist, which we haven't even gotten to a lot of that yet. In addition to all your marathon running, and so what's that like for you? As a person that's running a business and operating within academia, I imagine it seems like it may not be as bad for you because you're actually in a center for entrepreneurship. But I've seen scholars who've tried to have businesses on the side who kind of get pushback from the universities, kind of saying you shouldn't be doing that. You're supposed to just be doing research. What's that been like for you to be a scholar and an entrepreneur?
Yeah, it is. I'm in a good spot now, but let me talk about how I kind of got to here, and then maybe in the future I might be back there again. It is very hard. That kind of goes back to my mom teaching us, my dad teaching us, you don't take no for an answer. It's really hard to do a tenure track and also at the same time you're starting your tenure track, do a startup. So I chose not to do tenure track. That being one of the main reasons. But I still wanted to keep a foot in the university world. A, because it's a great, backup plan. You don't know whether a company's going to be successful or not. And then B, because it's a great hotbed for new ideas. It kind of keeps your brain young and keeps you going, right? Because even with a startup, you can get so focused on what you're doing with your startup, you don't even know that there's other competitors are coming down the pipeline at you. And so it's a great way to keep your finger on the pulse of things. And it's also a great way to still connect with students. I really like working with students, but it is really hard. It's not, it's I'll tell you some of my challenges, right, that I had when I first started University of Louisville, and even now, people don't understand what you're trying to do. So people don't understand. Why don't you just go for tenure? Like that's what no one's going to respect you until you go for tenure. And I'm like, I'm not working for the respect of other people. I'm working for what are my passions, what are my goals, what am I? And I had to keep focusing on
I
that.
love it. Keep talking.
Let me tell you, I went through, and to be honest, I was actually went through a stage of just being sad and like, well, maybe I'm not, I'm not as good as everybody else, and maybe I really should just do a tenure thing. I'll never be respected, and
Well,
I just had to remind
it's clear,
myself, it's
It's
not
clear,
about
Angelique, that you're a loser. I mean, you haven't accomplished anything. You're just not good enough. That's the problem. You're black, and you're just not. But please continue. We'll just keep talking.
But the reality is, you can't feel like a loser because what is valued in academia is publications. I purposely don't publish my work, right? So I already, you've lost respect. And I purposely don't publish because I don't want my competitors to know what's going on, what I'm doing. So I don't publish. I do raise money for my company, and I think that is the one, equalizer. So far I've probably raised maybe over $500,000, and I'm in the entrepreneurship world that's a little bit amount, but in academia that's significant. So that kind of equalizes it. But a lot of the things that you're rewarded for in academia are things that I purposely avoid, and so it's hard. I think for entrepreneurs that want to do it and want to have a startup and also be successful in academia, um, you can do two routes. A lot of professors actually do have startup companies post tenure, in particular, and some during the tenure process. What I found, and this is just me being honest, is that a lot of those startups are fronts for research money. So you can go out and raise $2 million for a startup, but what ends up happening is because they're so burdened by their obligation to university, that money that is supposed to be making commercializing the technology at the startup, in a sense, it is. In a more realistic sense, it's kind of just more another research arm for the research group. And that's what the government tries to avoid, and all these other things. But in reality, I found that that's actually what happens a lot because it's really hard to do both. So what I do is I have just a little bit of a foot in academia, but I have to focus on my startup. I have to make sure that's my goal. Everything all the money I raise, I put it towards making something that will go in the human body at some point in the near future, and not just another some research money so I can, play around in the lab or have my students or something like that. I mean, not to demean, not demoralize what people are doing, but the money is for a certain purpose. And I think it's hard to do to be in both worlds at the same time.
Well, I'll tell you, I love it. And I don't just love it in theory. I love it in practice because your career sounds a little bit like my own.
Mhm.
I'm a techie too. My PhD was in finance, which felt like I was studying rocket science or something. It was just everything was math all the time, and so I kind of hit academia, and there were these expectations kind of placed on me in terms of what I was supposed to do as a scholar, and the fact is that it just didn't make sense to me. I remember thinking, well, maybe I'm the crazy one, but this seems stupid right now. And I said, well, maybe I'm not totally dumb. And then as I got to trust myself, I kind of went back to some of the basics, and which I encourage you to hold on to. Which I think you already know this, but I'll share it with you anyway. The basics are that I'm a hardworking person, a persistent
Mhm.
person, an educated person, determined person. So to me, if you work hard and you've got skill and you're very persistent, you're going to always be successful at something. You
Mhm.
can't spend your whole life afraid of what's going to happen to you if you deviate from the norm. It's a lot like if you're driving a I don't know an armored truck like a tank, and you don't worry about what happens if I drive off the road. If you're in a tank, you're gonna get through the trees and the grass
Yeah.
and the bushes.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You're gonna get through. You may be off the beaten path, but maybe you're meant to be a trailblazer, and that's the point. Some people, not everybody has what it takes, right? I don't know, or maybe not everyone is trained to have what it takes, but you've got what it takes. You run marathons. That right there, that one thing alone says something about your level of determination and persistence. And people that have that kind of value system are almost always successful at something. So it seems to me that it makes no sense for someone that extraordinary to sit around saying, "Oh my God, what's going to happen to me if I don't make tenure?" Right?
Mhm.
And so the difference between our careers though is that you made the smart move of kind of rejecting the process and the system from the beginning. I rejected it after 3 or 4 years. I spent 4 years cranking out tons of research papers. I published more solo author research papers than anybody in the history of my department. And because I was thinking I'm going to do this tenure thing, and eventually I'm going to have some other stuff going on, and I got to figure out a way to route back to the black community because so many of our we have this huge brain drain
Mhm.
in our community where our best and brightest are pulled away to go to these universities and teach people who don't look like us and who
Mhm.
may not value us. And our people are starving for knowledge and information, but they can't get it because they can't afford to pay 30,000 a year in tuition,
Yeah.
right? So I wanted to do this, and what happened was that the more I started doing outside of academia, the
Mhm.
more I had people saying, "Well, what is he doing?" Like you know what I mean? Like I was like kind of like their child that was wandering off the road or
Yeah.
something,
Squandering his opportunities in life.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And then I would get phone calls from people saying, "Well, you're ruining your career, and this is going to really mess you up." And I even had someone that talked to me about taking a job, and she's at an HBCU, and she said, "Well, if you're gonna come work here, you got to stop doing all that extra stuff." And I was like, "You mean this this other stuff that actually reaches about 2 million people a week, like that just that nonsense, you know?" So my point is that. Over time, what happened was I came to the fundamental conclusion that I said, look, people try to get tenure. And scholars, I think most scholars, what are we seeking? We're seeking some sort of recognition for our work, some sort of, recognition of scholarly impact, and we're seeking financial security. That's why people will sell their souls just to get that financial security of tenure, even if it's a low salary, right?
Yeah.
And I said, okay, so as an entrepreneur, particularly now with technology being as big as it is, the internet opening up the game, I said that's an easier way to get financial security than this tenure process.
Yeah.
And scholarly impact. I mean, I can say that I teach thousands of students a year who pay to take my class, and I've influenced a lot of people. So the same as you, like you're helping so many people, you're doing such amazing things. So I would just say that what I love about your career, and I know it took me a while to say this. If you forgive me, it took me a
Oh
second to get
no.
this out, but you know. I just really think that you're one of those scholars that's really reshaping the game for so many people. I think there are so many young black scholars that are going to come through and they're going to say, okay, well, maybe I can go this route and do the tenure thing, which is fine, but they're going to know that there's always a healthy plan B waiting for you. You always have options. And that's
Yeah.
important because you have so many scholars that sacrifice everything for this tenure process. They don't get tenure. Maybe the university tells them, well, I know you worked 80 hours a week for the last 8 years on these projects, but it's just not good enough. You're not smart enough. Now, nobody asks why, nobody questions the fact that some of these universities haven't given tenure to a black person in 20 years, right?
Yeah.
Let's leave that off the table. But they're telling you you're not good enough. So here you have this brilliant person, this Angelique Johnson kind of person who's strived and achieved her whole life, and suddenly she's being told she's inadequate and that her extraordinary skill is worthless to the world. That is an absolute crime to me, and
Mhm.
it shouldn't be allowed. So that's why I like your approach. I like the double-barreled attack on your career, and I know you're going to be really successful. Now I'll let you get the last word because I don't want to get the last word because I know I just said so much. So
Well,
tell me.
thank you so much. I'm very encouraged to hear your story. It is when you step off the beaten path. There is a lot of, am I making the right decision type thing, and I'd always tell people I could be in a cardboard box next year. I fully understand that, but hopefully I made enough friends that I have somebody's couch I can live. No. But I'd rather be. I can always. Take my little cardboard box and set up shop, and I don't know, I'm gonna be selling something in that cardboard box.
There you go. And it'll be your box. You
It'll
own
be
it,
my
and you'll
box.
have your freedom, which is worth far more than any amount of money anybody
It'll
could
be
give you.
my box on my corner.
There you go.
I would say, kind of to piggyback off of what you said, some that I really hope that the system makes space for more people that kind of want to go off the beaten path. You do want to help students out. You do enjoy research. I love research. But at the same point, you want to be entrepreneurial. You have some things that you want to accomplish that are outside of just publishing papers. And I've come across a very well-known faculty member recently. He truly is brilliant. I would love to be on his level one day. And he told me the same thing you told me. Like it took me 4 years to get to the point where I realized, yeah, I could be very successful in academia, but it's not what I'm passionate about. What I'm turning out is not what I'm passionate about. And I don't know if there's anybody out here that's listening. I just encourage people to really, think about what it is that you're producing, and think about the concept of, do I want to benefit off of what I'm producing, or do I want somebody else to benefit off of what I'm producing? Because at some point in time, somebody came to me and said, hey, a lot of people have come to me and said, hey, why don't you invented the technology, why don't you just license it out, give it to somebody else, let a real company bring it to market. And I'm thinking, I made it. I put in all the work to make it. And not only did I make it and I want to benefit off of it, I know that because of my passion, because of my drive, because of my knowledge, I'm the best person to bring it to, fruition. And especially for African Americans, I think a lot of times we do really great things, and then somebody else kind of comes along and says, yeah, you got it this far, but let the real pro, like you're not really going to take it, all the way, and especially the younger generation, there are young, majority students that are starting startups, that are being entrepreneurs, in college, if not high school. And I really want to see, because I mostly don't get to see that in my classes. I want to see more African American students being given that opportunity and really believing in themselves. And it's hard. It's very hard as an African American to get comfortable with the concept that I don't have a financial security blanket, because we don't tend to have grandparents or great grandparents or mom and dad to fall back on. And so risk to us has a very personal, it's not just some abstract concept that I could be in a box on the corner someday. It's a very real memory of eating pork and beans night after night after night. I don't want to go back to that life. And I think
In a cardboard box, right?
in cardboard box, yes. And so, that it's very real for us. And I just hope that, if anyone has any questions about entrepreneurship, they can contact me. But I hope to be able to encourage as many people that were like me, that wondered if they could do it, that were told that just hand it off to somebody else, they can do better than you could do, to just encourage them to go for it. And there's plenty of people, especially like Dr. Boyce Watkins, and I'm available. And there's lots of Black entrepreneurs that have been successful, that are working on it, that would love to give advice and feedback, and will listen to your business pitch. And I'm always like, hey, tell me about your pitch. I'm not going to steal your idea, right? If your idea can be stolen in a 30, in a 3-minute pitch, it's not a great idea, right? So don't worry about that. But just to get feedback, and so hopefully that helps somebody somewhere out there to just keep pushing.
Well, you know what? I love it. What I can end with is this. I think about Mark Zuckerberg when he created Facebook in his dorm room, and he did this a few years ago, about a decade ago, a little more than a decade ago, and now Facebook is worth $250 billion, $250 billion. Larry Page and Sergey Brin, who created Google, they were in graduate school, and they were just computer programmers and who could have probably made tenure and got financial security from tenure. And now these guys probably earn about $1 billion a day
Yeah.
or something. Their company's worth over $500 billion, Google.
Yeah.
And I ask myself sometimes, I say, what if Larry, Sergey, and Mark had been African American?
Mhm.
What cultural influences would they have had? In terms of telling them what to do with their talent. I would be willing to bet you that a lot of our kids in that same position with that same ability would have been encouraged to go and get a job working
Yeah.
for somebody else, and they'd be sitting there making maybe 200,000 a year,
Mhm.
thinking, "Mama, I made it. Look how successful I am. I have financial security," without a single clue
Mhm.
of what would have awaited them if they had
Mhm.
chosen to take their idea to the finish line and to
That's
make sure they maintain ownership of what they created and what they built.
that's
So,
right.
so when I see you, you're no different from these people, you
Yeah.
know. And the other interesting thing about the internet too that I think is very powerful that people want to tap into, which is why people want to listen to people like you who are in STEM, is that you've got 22, 23-year-old kids who are making $100,000 a month, or $1 million a month. I mean, like
Yeah.
literally. I met a young brother the other day who's 23 and didn't finish college. He
Mhm.
said college was a waste of time after a while because he makes a $250,000 a month doing
Mhm.
Facebook advertising for
Mm.
people.
Ooh.
He trained himself to do it. He spent a few $1,000s,
Yeah.
learning how to do it, taking these classes online. And he said, now I can do it. Now I sell it, and I make a lot more
Yeah.
money I ever would have made spending $100,000, on a college degree. It doesn't mean the degree would have been worthless, but the thing
Yeah.
is, we're in a new world, and people have to
Mhm.
reshape what it means to learn,
Mm.
what it means to succeed, what it means
Yeah.
to build and own
Mm.
and achieve true power in this morphing, changing economic system that we live in. So
Yeah.
I congratulate you. I applaud you on your work.
Thank you.
I am super impressed, and I'm going to talk to you again in the
Oh
future.
yeah,
I
definitely,
hope that's okay with
definitely.
you. And what I'm going to do is remind everybody. This is Dr. Angelique Johnson. She is a PhD in electrical engineering, the CEO of MEMSTEM. That's MEMSTIM. Go Google it. Go look it up.
Mhm.
Read her background and bio. It's MEMSTEM LLC. She's also a faculty member at the Fork Center for Entrepreneurship at the University of Louisville. Fork is spelled FORCHT. I guess I'm from Kentucky
Yes,
too,
that, yep, that's
so
right.
they pronounce it as fork, which like a pitchfork, and I don't see where they're getting this, but just make sure you write it down, FORCHT, in case you guys look her up. And I also want to say thank you, Dr. Johnson, for your time. I really appreciate it.
Oh no, thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Oh.
All right, everybody. Once again, this is Dr. Angelique Johnson of the University of Louisville. I'm Dr. Boyce Watkins from Your Black Education and Financial Juneteenth University. And until we meet again, please stay strong, be blessed, and be educated. We are gone. Peace.